Welcome to the AEN Stories channel.
I'm a man who fixes things for a living. You bring me a truck that wheezes at 40, I'll find the leak, swap the hose, bleed a line, and get you back on the road. You come in with a minivan that squeals when you brake, I'll check your pads, rotors, and calipers, and I'll tell you straight if you need to spend the money now or can wait a month. People in our town know me from the shop that sits between the feed store and the bakery with a green awning. The sign says Ben's Auto, letters hand-painted by my cousin 10 years ago and fading just enough to look like they've been there forever. I keep a coffee pot in the corner, a jar of lollipops for kids, and a radio tuned to classic rock because some places should feel like they exist outside the algorithm. If there's a sentence that explains my summers, it's this: I work with my hands all week and spend my weekends building a life that feels like a reward. I poured the slab behind our house myself with a rented mixer and a borrowed vac. I built the gazebo one spring with YouTube, a level, and more screws than anyone would think necessary. I saved for the grill, big stainless steel, 6 burners, rotisserie attachment I don't use enough, side burner for a pot of beans that makes the whole yard smell like Saturday. Every June I drag the string lights out of the garage and hang them in a way that makes the backyard look like a picture on a beer label. By July, our place is the spot. Neighbors wander over with folding chairs and corn salad. Friends bring coolers. My mom and stepdad claim the corner near the lemon tree and hold court. Olivia's parents sit at the picnic table and argue about whether the coleslaw needs more pepper. I grill. I smile. I make a microphone out of a karaoke machine and narrate the cornhole bracket like it's the World Series. It's corny as hell, and it's the happiest I am. I met Olivia 6 summers ago at a 4th of July thing at the park where the Lions Club sell sausage sandwiches and fireworks go off just low enough to make you nervous. She was helping wrangle the kids' parade, the one with decorated bikes and dogs in bandanas, and she had that way of moving like music was in the room even when it wasn't. Dark hair, freckles, a laugh that made people look over because they wanted in on whatever caused it. We married a year later in a backyard ceremony at our parents' place. Fairy lights and cheap champagne and the kind of vows you write yourself that feel like you invented the words. We didn't do big plans. No Pinterest board. We did a potluck, and it was perfect. Olivia likes things to feel alive. She picks the loudest place to sit at a restaurant because she likes the hum. She's the one who volunteers to plan the gift exchange at Christmas and makes it weird in a way everyone ends up loving. She works part-time at the garden center, knows every plant like it owes her money, and can make a dead geranium look like a comeback story. She never used to like the idea of suburbia as a personality. She used to joke about us moving to the coast and running a coffee truck that parked by the ocean, making flat whites for surfers with names like River. Then she met our neighbor, and suburbia started to look like a stage. His name is Dylan, though I didn't learn it for a while because in my head he was just the guy who helps. That's how he introduced himself when he moved into the rental 2 doors down. "If you ever need a hand," he said, leaning on our fence with a grin like a billboard. Mid-30s, blonde in the gym membership way, a tattoo on his forearm of a compass that looked like it had directions to somewhere better than where we were standing. He worked nights sometimes, bartending, he said, and did some contracting on the side, which in our neighborhood can mean anything from building decks to installing DVs for people who don't want to find a stud. He started showing up in small ways that felt neighborly. Helped me lift a new smoker off the truck. Carried a bag of potting soil to Olivia's car. Stood around holding a socket set while I swapped the carb on my mower and nodded like he understood anything I said about float levels. I don't dislike people like Dylan. The world needs men who'll show up with a drill and a six-pack. But there are 2 kinds of helpers, the ones who hand you the wrench you need and the ones who hand it to your wife. He started coming over more when I was at work late, just to check on the gazebo lights or when I was in the garage finishing a brake job for a customer who needed her minivan back for the morning commute. Olivia would mention him like weather. "Oh, Dylan popped over," he said, the gate hinges squeaking. Or, "Dylan had a ladder, so he helped me get that limb down." It was a stream of small fixes that didn't register as anything but neighborly until I started noticing how often she said his name with the same light touch she used when she talked about a new favorite song. Summer came, and with it our annual barbecue. We do it mid-July when the heat has settled into something you can plan around. I set up the cornhole boards I painted with our last name in block letters. I chalked out a bracket on a piece of plywood. I iced down 2 coolers, one for beer, one for soda, and set out a tub with water bottles so no one pretended dehydration was a personality. I did my grocery run like a general stocking for a siege: chicken thighs, sausages, burgers, buns, corn, a ridiculous amount of chips because kids eat like squirrels. Olivia made her pasta salad that involves too much dill, but everyone asks for it anyway. She put melons into a bowl shaped like a melon because she likes a bit. Dylan came early. He had a bag of limes and 2 bottles of tequila and a suggestion for a signature cocktail that sounded like something that belongs on a yacht. "I'll man the bar," he offered, like a man volunteering to be useful in the part of the yard with the best view. He wore a tank top that said "Good Vibes" and a font I don't trust, and a pair of sunglasses that looked like they were meant to be stared at. He hugged Olivia hello and gave me one of those handshake half-hug things men do when they want to communicate closeness without committing to it. "You good, brother?" he asked, like the answer was supposed to be hell yeah. "Always," I said, because men don't say I don't know at their own parties. People arrived in waves. The neighbor kids ran like it was their job. My mom brought a tin of deviled eggs like she was being graded. Olivia's parents, Carol and Ron, came with a platter covered in foil and the kind of nervous generosity that always makes me want to hug them. They're sweet people. Ron taught industrial arts for 30 years and still carries himself like a person who believes in a plan and a backup plan. Carol used to run the front desk at the dentist's office and remembers every person she's ever met by their smile. They love me like they're relieved their daughter found someone who reads the directions and checks the smoke alarms. I started the grill. I like the way a grill sounds when you lay meat on it: sizzle, pop, the immediate promise of dinner. I called out, "First round of sausages in 10. Into the microphone, and people whooped like I'd announced a free car. I keep the mic because the first year I did the barbecue, folks kept asking me what we were playing and when the food was ready, and I figured if I was going to be the guy who answers questions, I might as well have a prop. Plus, it gives me an excuse to say things like, "We've got Beersby in the South Field if you want to lose to my cousin," and cornhole tournament sign-ups by the fence, "No ringers, Dylan," which got a laugh because Dylan was standing there spinning a bean bag like a bartender spins a shaker. The first time I noticed Olivia was missing was right after the first round of chicken came off. I went looking for her because there's a dance we do where I cook and she floats, and when the plates hit the table she makes sure the forks, napkins, and sauces are where people will find them without asking. She wasn't by the table. She wasn't by the bar. She wasn't in the kitchen, where a friend Lisa was cutting watermelon into easier triangles, or in the bathroom, where the line sometimes forms if someone brings cheese dip and doesn't warn anyone. I figured she was with our neighbor's 2-year-old, who likes to hide under the trampoline and beg for juice pouches like a raccoon. I didn't see her under there either. I found her by absence, which is how you find most things you don't want to. Someone asked if I'd seen Dylan. Someone else said, he and Olivia went to grab more ice. We had enough ice. The coolers were still heavy. There's the kind of ice you need and the kind you use as a reason. I didn't run. I set down the tongs, turned down the burners, and told my cousin to flip the sausages in 4 minutes because I'd be right back. Then I walked around the side of the house. If you stand on our deck and look left, you see the yard, the fence, the neighbor's maple, the sky. If you step off the deck and walk along the flagstone path, you get to the side yard where we park the mower and stack firewood we never seem to use before it turns gray. If you keep going, you get to the back corner where the garage sticks out a few feet, making a little shadowed wedge you can see from the deck or the neighbor's yard or anywhere but right up on it. It's a place I've stood to pee when the bathroom line was too long and life was short. It's also, apparently, a place where people who aren't married to each other think the world won't follow. I didn't hear them at first. I saw the flick of a movement, a shoulder and a hand, a curve that belonged to a person I've known to my bones. I stopped like my feet were attached to a lever and someone pulled it. They were in an embrace that would have looked like greeting if the rest of their bodies hadn't been telling the truth. Olivia's head was tucked under Dylan's chin in that way you do when a thing is both wrong and feels like the right kind of wrong. His hand was on her back, low, fingers splayed like a claim that doesn't belong on my land. She said something I couldn't hear, and he laughed into her hair. My stomach did the thing it does on a roller coaster right before the drop, the body remembering it can't fly. There are versions of this story where I punch him. There are versions where I yell, where I say her name and it echoes in the driveway and everyone hears it like the town siren. There are versions where I break a plate or a promise or my own rule about being a man who doesn't make strangers uncomfortable. I didn't choose any of those. I watched for 2 seconds that felt like a full-length movie. Olivia must have felt the air shift because she pulled back the way you do when you think you heard a leaf fall. Her eyes met mine. I've seen a lot of looks on that face, mischief, tenderness, boredom, fury that I forgot to defrost the chicken. I had not seen this one. It was a combination of caught and calculation and please. It said, don't. It said, not here. It said, I'm sorry without making a sound. Dylan's mouth opened like a man about to claim the weather. He didn't get the chance. I turned around and walked back to the yard. I've never been more aware of my hands than I was in the next 30 seconds. I washed them at the tap even though they weren't dirty. I took a breath that told my body it was still mine. I picked up the tongs and flipped the sausages. My cousin looked at me and then looked away, because I must have had a face on me that said later, not now. The music was still playing, a playlist Olivia had made for cookouts that ran from Motown to stuff with synths. Someone laughed at the far table. A kid yelled about a bee. Life did not pause. I picked up the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, cheerful and steady, the same voice I use to announce a winner or ask folks to put their cups in the bin so raccoons don't throw a party once we go to bed. Real quick before we get into the next round of cornhole, can we get a big hand for the folks who decided to host a private little celebration behind the garage? There was a beat, the kind after a joke where people figure out if they're supposed to laugh. Then 30 heads turned in the same direction. The way a crowd moves when it's one animal is a lesson I wish I'd learned before I needed it. You could hear the rustle of shirts. You could hear the pause in a song where the singer takes a breath. You could hear my mom whisper, "Oh, Ben," into my stepdad's shoulder. Olivia and Dylan stepped into view because there was no world where they didn't. She had that posture people get when they try to make themselves both smaller and more visible, shoulders tucked but chin up, like she could steer the narrative by meeting it. Dylan did the opposite. He puffed a little. He squared his jaw like a man who thinks a better picture will save him. A gasp came from the table where the teenagers sat. It sounded like theater, and it wasn't. It was a sound people make when a thing they thought only existed in whispers is happening with the lights on. I didn't say her name. I didn't say his. I didn't need to. The sentence hung in the air like the laundry of my whole life. I set the microphone down. For a second, we lived in the kind of quiet you usually only get inside a church when the sermon just hit a vein. Then the world rushed back. Chairs scraped. Someone murmured Jesus like a prayer and a swear at once. Lisa, bless her, took the tongs from my hand and started moving chicken to a platter because she knows a man who needs his hands unoccupied when his heart is doing math it didn't plan for. Olivia's parents stood up at the same time with the same face, which is a face adults wear when they remember they raised a person and they still have work to do. Ron got there first. He's not big on public anything. At our wedding, he barely toasted. He cleared his throat and put a hand on the picnic table like he was giving a lesson. "Olivia," he said, and his voice had the kind of weight that makes people stop fussing with their napkins. This is not who we are. This man," he pointed at me without looking away from his daughter, "built this family a home. He saved your mother's back with that gazebo. He saved your car twice. He throws this party every summer because he believes in people. And you," he swallowed, "you do this here? At his table?" He looked at Dylan then, for a half-second, a look that could scrape paint. "Go home," he said to him, not loud, and maybe the quiet made it sharper. "Now." Dylan went. Or, if we're telling it straight, he backed up and tried to make eye contact with me as if we were going to hash it out with some primitive code. I didn't give him that. He turned and walked the shame walk across my lawn to the gate, the neon letters on his tank top ridiculous under the afternoon sun. Olivia stayed. Where was she going to go? The yard was our life arranged in folding chairs. She looked at me and then at her mom. Carol had a hand over her mouth and tears that wanted to be something else. She took her hand down and said, In a voice like a dry snap, "You've embarrassed me," which is a spray bottle of a sentence people use when they want to cool down a fire. Then she stepped around the table and hugged me, hard. It was a ridiculous moment, me, smelling like smoke and chicken, being crushed by my mother-in-law while half the neighborhood pretended to check their phones. She whispered, "We love you, honey," and I nodded because if I tried to say anything my voice wouldn't have been mine. I didn't make a speech. I announced the next round of cornhole. It sounds insane, and maybe it is, but I did. "Okay," I said into the mic, second nature finding me like muscle memory does. Team Sanchez vs Team Miller on board 1. Losers buy the winners a soda. A few nervous laughs turned into small, real ones because people needed a way back to normal, or something adjacent to it. Kids went back to yelling about bees. The sausages got eaten. The sun kept doing what it does, low and generous. Olivia walked over to me slowly like a person approaching a dog that might bite. "Can we talk?" she said, more statement than question, the way people say rain. "Not here," I said, soft but firm, and I wasn't trying to punish her with the phrase. I just meant I won't help you build a new story on the ashes of my yard. After. She nodded, eyes shining and furious and ashamed and still beautiful in a way that made me hate the way the world keeps being beautiful just because it can. People stayed, because leaving then would have been a statement they didn't feel ready to make, and staying was a statement they didn't know they were making. That's the thing about communities, sometimes you can hear them working, like a power line in summer. My mom came over and asked me if I needed anything and then gave me something anyway, a paper plate with a burger I didn't want and a look that said "I see you." My stepdad stood with Ron, two men of different styles united by the idea that men should make things work if they can and make them stop if they can't. The party wound down the way all parties do, even the ones that get a scene in the middle. People hugged me a beat longer at the gate. Friends said text if you need and meant it the way people only mean it when there's a thing to need. The teenagers asked if they should stack chairs and I said yes because it's good to give kids something to do when they don't know where to put their faces. Finally it was quiet. Olivia and I stood in a yard that smelled like charcoal and lemon dish soap and the end of something. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table because that's the only place I know how to sit when I need to talk like an adult. She started. "I'm sorry," she said, the words coming out like they cost money. "I'm so sorry." She put her hands flat on the table like a person being honest. There's not a good story. I was lonely. I felt like I was watching my life happen to me. Dylan made me feel stupid things. She laughed, a small ugly sound. Young. Wanted. That I could be a surprise again. I listened. I kept my jaw from doing what jaws do when they want to say "How dare you use my house to narrate your boredom." I nodded in a way that meant "Go on, not I agree." "Did you love him?" I asked, because there are durable questions and that's one. "No," she said too fast, then, after a breath, "I don't think so. I don't know. I loved the feeling." She looked at me like I was a test she was ready to finally fail. "I'm sorry," she said again, softer. "I humiliated you." I could have told her I humiliated myself by holding up the mic and doing my line like a man doing theater in a kitchen. But shame is a slippery thing. It rolls downhill to whoever is willing to lie down. "You humiliated yourself," I said, even, and she flinched because the sentence found home. "And your parents." "And me, sure. But mostly yourself. Which means this is not a problem I can fix with a socket wrench." We talked about the practical because practicals keep you from bleeding out while the big questions stalk the room. She said she'd sleep at her parents' for a while. I said that was smart. She asked if she could get clothes and I said yes, and then I left the room because I didn't want to watch her choose shirts like a movie picking scenes. Her parents came over with a duffel bag and a combination of righteous and destroyed that made me want to break my own windows just to make a noise that matched the day. Carol hugged me again. Ron shook my hand like he was thanking me for service. I didn't know what to do with any of the tenderness, so I thanked them for coming and told them where the spare towels still live, like I was giving them a tour of a place they already know. When the house was quiet, I sat in the gazebo with the lights on and the radio low and a beer I didn't drink. My phone buzzed in fits, texts from friends, from my cousin, From a number I didn't know that turned out to be Dylan's roommate sending a masterpiece of a message that reads simply, "He's an idiot." I didn't answer anyone. The crickets did their thing. A neighbor's sprinkler made the ticking sound sprinklers make, little machine hearts beating away behind fences. I thought about the way Olivia looked right before she saw me. I thought about the way she looked after. I thought about myself, which is a thing I haven't done enough at any volume. The days that followed had shape because I gave them shape. I went to the shop early, opened the bay doors, stood in the oil and rubber smell that feels like home, and let engines and bolts and the snug click of a torque wrench remind me that some things take the force you apply and do the exact thing you want them to. I told the guys the basic version because it would have been weird to say nothing. "Liv and I are taking a break," I said, and I didn't add the scene because I didn't want my workplace to be the place where that loop played on a big imaginary screen. They said the right things men say, "I'm here, brother, you want to grab a beer, you need anything from me, I can cover Saturday, don't worry about the Civic on Bay 3." And then we did break jobs because breaks don't care about your personal life. Olivia texted on day 3 that she'd told Dylan to stay away. She said she blocked him and would keep him blocked. She said she wanted to try therapy. I said okay to therapy because I believe in a version of the world where people can get new words for old pain. She asked if we could talk about rules if she moved back in. I said not yet. I told her I'd find a counselor. I called my friend Lisa's sister, who's a therapist, and she gave me 3 names and a speech about boundaries I should have written down. Olivia's parents kept coming by with food because that's how people in our town say we love you when the words feel like too much. Ron helped me replace the wobbly leg on the picnic table because fixing a thing together is cleaner than crying. He said, "We're with you," and I said, "I know," and the air between us felt like a bridge we both wanted to test before we drove anything heavy over it. My mom delivered a lasagna and a lecture about not drinking alone, which I didn't need but made me feel 12 again in a way that was oddly stabilizing. A week later, Olivia and I sat in a therapist's office in chairs that didn't squeak and a rug that made your feet feel like you were someplace civilized. We told the story without the parts that would ruin the telling. The therapist stopped me when I started to talk about the grill and the gazebo and the summers I built like a lifestyle. "What did those things mean to you?" she asked, like I was alone. "That I could make joy," I said, surprised. "That I could take care of people in a way that they could taste." She nodded. "And to you?" she asked Olivia. "That I lived in a calendar," she said. "That I was a supporting character in someone else's tidy movie. That I was safe," she added, and then, quieter, "and bored." The therapist didn't flinch. She didn't decide for us. That's not the job. She told us that a marriage isn't a car you can swap a part on and have it run like new. It's more like a fence. You can replace boards, shore up posts, but if the ground shifts, the whole thing needs a new plan or it falls. She said trust is a thing you build over time the way you build strength, reps, rest, consistency. She said we didn't have to decide that day if we were building anything together. For now, here's what I know, the gazebo still stands. The lights still look good against a summer night. The grill still does what it's supposed to and makes a sound that tells you you're home. I still love throwing a party. I'll do another one, maybe not this year, maybe next. I'll invite the neighbors who minded their business and the friends who showed up with foil-covered casseroles and the kids who squeal about bees like they just learned the word. I'll stand with a microphone and tell people where the bathroom is and who's up on board one, and I'll mean it when I say I'm glad you're here, because I am. Olivia and I are in the part of the story where the pages turn slower because you keep checking whether you want to keep reading. She's at her parents' and we go to therapy and sometimes we walk around the block and talk about the future like it's a house we might buy if we can agree on the price. Sometimes we sit in silence and that silence is kinder than any speech we could give. She asked me last night if I could ever forgive her. I said I don't know. It's the truest thing I've said in months. I told her forgiveness isn't a gift card. It's a muscle. I'll see if it grows. If you came by right now, you'd find me on the deck with the radio low and a beer sweating on the rail and a plate of chicken I finally didn't overcook. You'd hear a mower on the next street and a dog who believes in his job. You'd see the garage casting its same small wedge of shade and you might think about the scene, because I do, and I tell you I'm trying not to live there. I'm trying to live where the light is, even if it means people see me more than I planned. I'm a man who fixes things for a living. Some things you can't fix. Some things you can build again, different. Some things you leave behind and keep the tools. I don't know yet which this is. I know I'll keep the grill hot for the people who treat it like a gift. I know I'll keep the microphone, because I like to hear good news out loud. And I know, if nothing else, that when I said, "Let's applaud the couple behind the garage," what I meant was look with me. I didn't mean look at me. I meant look at what I refuse to hold in the dark. If there's a way forward, I think it starts there, in the kind of light that makes you squint and still step out. Thank you for listening my story. If you want more raw, real, and gripping stories like this one, subscribe to the AEN Stories channel. Your support keeps these stories alive.